From a gender-swapping child star who never acted again to rejected James Bond composers and bizarre yak-riding teasers, The Golden Child hides secrets stranger than its mystical plot. Eddie Murphy called it a piece of shit, yet this 1986 fantasy comedy cost Paramount $330,000 just for the script and sparked a competitive race against another movie with an eerily similar plot. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about The Golden Child. Fact 1. The Golden Child was actually a girl. When audiences watched The Golden Child in 1986, they assumed the mystical young boy at the center of the story was played by a male actor. But that assumption was completely wrong. The titular Golden Child was actually portrayed by 7-year-old Jasmine Lauren Riate, a young girl who was deliberately credited under the gender-neutral name JL. Riate in the film's opening and closing credits. This wasn't an accident or an oversight by the production team. The role specifically called for a young boy, and the filmmakers made a conscious decision to hide the fact that they had cast a girl in the part. The reasoning behind this choice was straightforward. They wanted audiences to believe they were watching a boy playing a boy, maintaining the illusion that the character on screen matched the gender specified in the script. Jasmine was selected from hundreds of child actors who auditioned for the role, and her ability to convincingly portray a male character at such a young age impressed director Michael Ritchie and the casting team. The secrecy around her gender extended beyond just the credits. During the film's promotional campaign and press materials, the studio carefully avoided revealing that the Golden Child was played by a girl, and this detail remained largely unknown to general audiences for years after the movie's release. It wasn't until much later, when film historians and trivia enthusiasts dug deeper into the production's background, that this surprising casting choice became more widely known. The decision to use initials instead of her full first name was a deliberate strategy to maintain the mystery and preserve the authenticity of the character as audiences experienced the film. Fact 2. It was her only acting role ever. Jasmine Riate's performance as the Golden Child marked not only her film debut, but also her one and only appearance in any movie or television production throughout her entire life. Despite starring alongside one of the biggest comedy stars of the 1980s in a major studio release from Paramount Pictures, Riate never pursued acting again after the cameras stopped rolling. This makes her one of the most unique cases in Hollywood history. A child actor who landed a significant role in a high-profile film and then completely walked away from the entertainment industry. After The Golden Child wrapped production, Riate returned to a normal childhood and eventually pursued a completely different career path that had nothing to do with performing or show business. She went on to build a successful career in the film festival world, eventually becoming the executive director of events at the prestigious Toronto International Film Festival, one of the most important and influential film festivals in the world. In this role, she works behind the scenes organizing and coordinating major events, premieres, and screenings, staying connected to the movie industry, but from the opposite side of the camera. Her decision to step away from acting after such a memorable debut remains something of a mystery, as most child actors who land roles in major studio films typically continue auditioning and working in Hollywood. Whether it was a personal choice by Riate herself, a decision made by her parents, or simply a lack of interest in continuing as a performer, her single film credit makes her story one of the most unusual and fascinating aspects of the Golden Child's legacy. Fact 3. Originally written for Mel Gibson as serious drama. The Golden Child, that eventually became an Eddie Murphy comedy vehicle, looked completely different on the page when screenwriter Dennis Feldman first conceived the project. The original screenplay was titled The Rose of Tibet, and it was written as a dark, gritty detective thriller in the style of classic Raymond Chandler novels like The Big Sleep and Farewell, My Lovely. Feldman envisioned the story as a serious dramatic mystery with noir elements, focusing on a hard-boiled private investigator who gets pulled into a dangerous world of Tibetan mysticism and ancient prophecies. The tone was meant to be atmospheric and suspenseful rather than comedic, with the protagonist written as a tough, world-weary detective navigating through shadowy conspiracies. When Feldman was developing the script, he specifically had Mel Gibson in mind for the lead role, imagining someone who could bring intensity and dramatic weight to the character. At that time, Gibson was riding high on the success of the Mad Max films and was being considered for various action and thriller projects. The script made the rounds in Hollywood and generated significant interest from studios and producers, but as often happens in the film industry, the project went through major changes during development. When Eddie Murphy became attached to the film, the entire approach shifted dramatically. The studio recognized that Murphy's strengths were in comedy and rapid-fire improvisation, not brooding dramatic intensity. So they made the decision to completely retool the screenplay to suit his comedic style and persona, transforming what was meant to be a serious thriller into the fantasy-comedy hybrid that audiences eventually saw in theaters. Fact 4. Eddie Murphy chose it over Star Trek. 4. Eddie Murphy faced a significant career decision in the mid-1980s when he had to choose between two very different film projects, and his choice would become one of his biggest professional regrets. Murphy was offered a role in Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, which would have put him in the middle of one of the most beloved science fiction franchises in entertainment history. The role being discussed would have been specifically created for Murphy, allowing him to bring his comedic energy to the Star Trek universe. However, Murphy decided to pass on the opportunity to work with William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy, choosing instead to star in The Golden Child, which seemed like a safer bet at the time, given that it was being developed specifically as a vehicle for his talents. Murphy's decision proved to be a miscalculation. While Star Trek IV became a critical and commercial success, earning over $133 million at the box office and receiving widespread praise from both fans and critics, The Golden Child received mixed reviews and was seen as a disappointment compared to Murphy's previous hits, like Beverly Hills Cop and Trading Places. Murphy didn't hold back when discussing his regret about the decision in later interviews. He openly referred to The Golden Child as a piece of shit, expressing his frustration with how the film turned out and acknowledging that he had made the wrong choice. His blunt assessment of the film became widely quoted and added to the movie's reputation as one of Murphy's weaker efforts during what was otherwise an incredibly successful period in his career. Fact 5. John Carpenter rejected it to make a nearly identical movie. In one of the strangest coincidences in Hollywood history, director John Carpenter was approached to direct The Golden Child, but turned down the opportunity because he was already committed to making another film with an almost identical plot. Carpenter had signed on to direct Big Trouble in Little China, a fantasy action comedy that also centered around Chinese mysticism, ancient prophecies, and a hero navigating a supernatural world filled with magic and martial arts. The similarities between the two projects were striking. Both films featured American protagonists who get pulled into ancient Asian spiritual conflicts. Both involved rescuing innocent victims from evil sorcerers. Both mixed comedy with fantasy action, and both explored similar themes of Eastern mysticism through a Western lens. Big Trouble in Little China was released in July of 1986, just 5 months before The Golden Child hit theaters in December of that same year. This close proximity in release dates created an awkward situation where audiences were essentially being offered two variations on the same basic concept within half a year. The timing led to inevitable comparisons between the films, with critics and moviegoers debating which movie executed the similar premise more successfully. While Big Trouble in Little China initially underperformed at the box office, it eventually became a cult classic and is now considered one of Carpenter's most beloved films, whereas The Golden Child is generally remembered as a lesser entry in Eddie Murphy's filmography. Carpenter's decision to stick with his project rather than jump ship to Murphy's film turned out to be the right call, though neither movie was a massive commercial hit during their initial theatrical runs. Fact 6. George Miller rejected it because Murphy made him wait. Eddie Murphy had a specific vision for who should direct The Golden Child, and at the top of his wish list was George Miller, the Australian filmmaker who had created the groundbreaking Mad Max series. Murphy was impressed by Miller's ability to blend action, visual storytelling, and unique characters, and he thought Miller's kinetic directing style would be perfect for the fantasy action sequences that The Golden Child required. A meeting was arranged between Murphy and Miller to discuss the project and potentially bring Miller on board as the film's director. However, the meeting never really happened in any meaningful way. When Miller arrived at the scheduled time, he was told that Murphy was running late and asked to wait. What should have been a brief delay turned into an extended waiting period that stretched on for 4 hours. Miller sat waiting for Murphy to show up, watching the clock tick by as the supposed meeting time came and went. After 4 hours of sitting around with no sign of Murphy and no clear explanation for the excessive delay, Miller decided he had waited long enough. The experience left a bad impression on the director, and he made the decision to pass on The Golden Child entirely. From Miller's perspective, the lack of respect shown by keeping him waiting for such an extended period suggested potential difficulties and unprofessionalism that he didn't want to deal with during a lengthy film production. The incident reflects the challenges that can arise when major stars wield significant power in Hollywood. Murphy was at the peak of his commercial success and likely had numerous demands on his time, but the consequence was losing out on a talented director who might have elevated the material considerably. Fact 7. The film had 2 complete musical scores. The Golden Child has the unusual distinction of having 2 entirely different musical scores composed for it, with only one of them actually making it into the final theatrical release. The original composer hired for the project was John Barry, a legendary figure in film music who had created the iconic scores for 11 James Bond films, including classics like Goldfinger, You Only Live Twice, and The Spy Who Loved Me. Barry approached The Golden Child with his trademark orchestral style, recording a complete score that featured sweeping strings, dramatic brass sections, and the kind of sophisticated arrangements he was famous for throughout his career. However, when the studio conducted test screenings with audiences, they discovered that Barry's traditional orchestral score wasn't connecting with viewers the way they had hoped. The studio executives felt that the music was too serious and old-fashioned for a film starring Eddie Murphy, whose audience expected a more contemporary and energetic sound. Faced with this problem, Paramount made the drastic decision to throw out Barry's entire score and start from scratch with a different composer. They brought in Michel Colombier, a French composer known for his modern electronic and synthesizer-based work, and gave him an incredibly tight deadline. He had just 2 weeks to compose, arrange, record, and deliver a completely new score for the entire film. Colombier responded to this pressure by creating a synth-pop-influenced score that used electronic instruments, drum machines, and contemporary production techniques that were popular in the mid-1980s. This replacement score gave the film a completely different musical identity, one that aligned more closely with the pop music sensibilities of Eddie Murphy's audience and the MTV generation. Fact 8. Charlotte Lewis was only 18. During filming the role of Ki Nang, the female lead who serves as Eddie Murphy's mystical guide and love interest throughout The Golden Child, went to Charlotte Lewis, who was barely an adult when she landed this major Hollywood part. Lewis was only 18 years old during the production of the film, making her nearly 20 years younger than Murphy, who was in his mid-20s at the time. The casting process for this crucial role was extensive and competitive, with the studio seeing over 500 actresses who auditioned for the part of Ki Nang. The character required someone who could project both physical strength and mysterious allure, as Ki Nang is portrayed as a skilled fighter and guardian who exists between the modern world and ancient mystical traditions. Lewis beat out hundreds of other hopefuls to win the role, and the studio recognized the significance of her casting by offering her a substantial contract worth $150,000, an impressive sum for such a young and relatively unknown actress at the time. For Lewis, The Golden Child served as her breakthrough introduction to American audiences and Hollywood studio filmmaking, marking a major step up from her previous work. The role showcased her martial arts abilities, required her to perform numerous action sequences, and positioned her as a potential rising star in action and adventure films. She brought an exotic presence to the film that complemented Murphy's comedic style, and their on-screen chemistry became one of the elements that reviewers highlighted when discussing the movie. The substantial paycheck and high-profile nature of the project launched Lewis into a period of steady work in Hollywood throughout the late 1980s and early 1990s. Fact 9. Special effects by the Star Wars team. The Golden Child featured numerous fantasy and supernatural elements that required sophisticated special effects work, and the studio turned to the best in the business to bring these sequences to life. Paramount hired Industrial Light and Magic, the visual effects company founded by George Lucas that had revolutionized movie magic with their groundbreaking work on the Star Wars trilogy. ILM brought some of their most talented artists to work on The Golden Child, including Phil Tippett, an animator who had already established himself as a master of creature effects in the Star Wars universe. Tippett was famous for creating the stop-motion animation of the massive AT-AT walkers that attack the ice planet Hoth in The Empire Strikes Back, as well as bringing the Tauntauns, the lizard-like riding creatures, to life with his meticulous animation work. For The Golden Child, Tippett employed a technique called go-motion animation, which was an advancement over traditional stop-motion that ILM had developed to create more realistic movement. Go-motion worked by incorporating motion blur into each frame of animation, making the creatures and effects look more lifelike and less jerky than standard stop-motion techniques. This technology was used to animate the various demons, mystical creatures, and supernatural elements that appear throughout the film, including the grotesque Sardo-Numspa demon form and other fantasy beings. The involvement of ILM and Tippett gave The Golden Child a level of visual effects sophistication that elevated the production value considerably, connecting the film to the same technological innovations that had made Star Wars such a visual milestone. The effects work helped sell the reality of the mystical world that the characters inhabit, making the supernatural elements feel tangible and threatening rather than cheap or unconvincing. Fact 10. Legendary stuntman. Gene LaBelle's disgusting cameo. One of the memorable supporting characters in The Golden Child is a crude biker who appears during a scene where Eddie Murphy's character, Chandler Jarrell, is tied up and helpless. This unpleasant character leans in close and exhales his foul breath directly into Murphy's face, creating a moment of gross-out comedy that plays up Jarrell's powerless situation. The role might seem like a throwaway bit part, but it was actually played by someone with legendary status in the stunt and martial arts community. Gene LaBelle, known throughout Hollywood as Judo Gene LaBelle, took on this small but memorable cameo appearance. LaBelle was far from just another character actor or extra. He was one of the most respected and accomplished stuntmen, wrestlers, and martial artists in the entertainment industry. His career stretched back decades and included work as a professional wrestler, a judo champion who had won national competitions, and a pioneer in mixed martial arts before that term even existed. LaBelle had worked on hundreds of films and television shows as a stunt coordinator and performer, and he was famous in Hollywood for his tough guy reputation and his willingness to perform dangerous stunts that other performers wouldn't attempt. He had trained numerous actors in fight choreography and martial arts, and his connections in the film industry made him a sought-after presence on action-oriented productions. For LaBelle to take on such a small and unflattering role in The Golden Child shows the kind of good humor and professionalism he was known for, being willing to play a disgusting drunk biker just to be part of the production and work alongside Eddie Murphy and the rest of the cast. Fact 11. Bizarre teaser trailer featured Murphy on a yak. The marketing campaign for The Golden Child took an unusual approach with its teaser trailer, which appeared in theaters during the summer of 1986, several months before the film's December release date. Rather than showing clips from the actual movie or setting up the plot in a traditional way, the teaser featured an original scene that was shot specifically for promotional purposes and never appeared in the film itself. The teaser showed Eddie Murphy dressed in heavy winter clothing, sitting on the back of a yak, a large, shaggy animal native to Tibet and other mountainous regions of Asia, while surrounded by what appeared to be a blizzard with snow falling heavily around him. Murphy looked directly at the camera with his characteristic expression of bemused frustration and delivered a complaint that broke the fourth wall. "If I'm the chosen one, how come I'm freezing while you're sitting in a warm movie theater?" The teaser was designed to introduce audiences to the film's mystical Tibetan setting while showcasing Murphy's comedic personality and his tendency to comment on the absurdity of the situations his characters find themselves in. The decision to create an original scene rather than using footage from the film was an interesting marketing choice that emphasized Murphy's star power and suggested that the film would feature his trademark style of self-aware comedy. The image of Murphy riding a yak through a snowstorm became one of the pre-release talking points for the film, generating curiosity about what kind of wild adventure the movie would take audiences on and emphasizing the exotic foreign locations where the story takes place. Fact 12. Eddie Murphy secretly sang his own name in a scene. During one of the scenes in The Golden Child, where Chandler Jarrell is returning from his adventure in Nepal, Eddie Murphy found an opportunity to inject a bit of personal fun into the film through his improvisation skills. The scene shows Murphy's character sitting on an airplane wearing headphones, apparently listening to music, and Murphy begins singing along to whatever song is supposedly playing through the headphones. Since the audience can't hear what Jarrell is listening to, Murphy took advantage of the fact that he could essentially sing anything he wanted, and the gibberish would just look like someone enthusiastically but poorly singing along to a tune only they can hear. But if you listen carefully to what Murphy is actually singing during this moment, you can make out real words hidden among the ad-lib nonsense. Murphy sneaked in a lyric that goes, "Eddie Murphy is a cool man," essentially using the scene to give himself a compliment while staying in character. This kind of improvisation was typical of Murphy's approach to filmmaking during this period of his career. He was known for going off script and adding his own comedic bits during takes, and directors generally encouraged this because Murphy's spontaneous moments often ended up being some of the funniest parts of his films. The airplane scene gave him a perfect setup to play around because the character is supposed to be singing something incomprehensible anyway, so Murphy could hide his self-referential joke in plain sight. Most viewers would never catch the specific words unless they were listening very carefully or knew to watch for this particular Easter egg. Fact 13. Paramount Panic Edited. After test screenings. The version of The Golden Child that eventually played in theaters looked significantly different from what director Michael Ritchie originally assembled, thanks to Paramount's nervous reaction to early test screening results. When the studio showed the film to preview audiences before its release, the response was far more lukewarm than they had hoped for. Executives worried that they had a potential box office disappointment on their hands, and they decided that drastic measures were needed to save the project. The studio's solution was to cut approximately 30 minutes of footage from the film, removing entire scenes and subplots that they felt were slowing down the pace or not playing well with audiences. but the changes didn't stop with just trimming existing material. Paramount also ordered reshoots of certain scenes, bringing the cast and crew back together to film new material that would punch up the comedy and showcase more of Eddie Murphy's improvisational talents and comedic persona. The goal was essentially to transform the film from the more mystical and plot-driven adventure it had been into something that felt more like what audiences expected from an Eddie Murphy movie, particularly after the massive success of Beverly Hills Cop 2 years earlier. Film industry observers and critics later described this retooling as turning The Golden Child into Beverly Hills Cop in Tibet, suggesting that the studio tried to replicate the formula of Murphy's biggest hit by emphasizing his fish-out-of-water comedy and rapid-fire dialogue over the original screenplay's more serious mystical elements. These last-minute changes created a final product that felt somewhat uneven in tone, with the remaining dramatic and mystical sequences sitting awkwardly alongside the added Murphy-isms and comedic moments. Fact 14. The script sparked a studio bidding war. Before The Golden Child became associated with Eddie Murphy and went through all its various changes during production, the original screenplay by Dennis Feldman created significant excitement in Hollywood that led to multiple studios competing to acquire the project. What made this bidding war particularly noteworthy was that Feldman had very little track record as a screenwriter at that point in his career. His only previous credit was the teen comedy Just One of the Guys, a modest film about a high school girl who disguises herself as a boy to prove she can succeed as a journalist. That single comedy credit hardly suggested that Feldman would be capable of writing a mystical thriller with serious dramatic aspirations. Yet his script for what was then called The Rose of Tibet impressed development executives at multiple studios who saw potential in the concept and execution. The screenplay made the rounds through Hollywood's network of agents, producers, and studio readers, generating the kind of buzz that every screenwriter hopes for but rarely achieves. Multiple studios expressed interest in purchasing the script and developing it into a feature film, leading to a competitive situation where studios had to bid against each other to secure the rights. Paramount Pictures ultimately won this bidding war by offering Feldman $330,000 for his screenplay, a substantial sum that reflected both the studio's enthusiasm for the project and the competitive pressure driving up the price. For context, this amount was well above what most spec scripts sold for during the mid-1980s, indicating that studios saw real commercial potential in the story. The high purchase price also created pressure on Paramount to make the film work commercially, as they had already invested significantly just to acquire the script before spending anything on production. Fact 15. Murphy and Rita reunited. After 33 years. For more than 3 decades, Eddie Murphy and Jasmine Reet had no contact with each other after filming The Golden Child together in 1985 and 1986. Murphy went on to become one of the biggest movie stars in the world, appearing in dozens of films and maintaining his status as a comedy icon, while Rita built her career in the film festival world and never appeared in another movie. Their paths seemed unlikely to cross again until 1919, when a special reunion was arranged at the Toronto International Film Festival, where Rita worked as executive director of events. The reunion brought Murphy and Rita together for the first time since Rita was a young child on the movie set, and the meeting carried emotional weight for both of them, given how much time had passed and how different their lives had turned out. During the reunion, Rita shared her memories of working with Murphy when she was just 6 and 7 years old, and she spoke warmly about his kindness toward her during filming. She specifically told interviewers that Murphy was just as kind as I remembered him when I was 6, suggesting that his treatment of her as a child actor had made a lasting positive impression that remained vivid even 33 years later. For Murphy, the reunion offered a chance to reconnect with someone who had been part of an important moment in his career, even if The Golden Child wasn't his most celebrated film. The reunion highlighted one of the more heartwarming aspects of the film's legacy. Despite all the production troubles and Murphy's own harsh assessment of the finished product, the experience of making the film created genuine connections between the people involved. The people involved. The people involved. The people involved.